VendorPM has seen rapid growth since its launch, including expanding into the US, raising significant financing, as you've already mentioned. What factors do you attribute to this?
Startups are not glamorous. They suck a lot of the time. And if you don't have a team that is willing to dedicate everything to this and bash through every brick wall to deliver for your customers, you're not going to make it. And we've been so fortunate that since day one, we've just had some of the most intelligent, talented, and hardworking people that we just wouldn't be here. That wasn't the case. And then the last thing I'll say, every single feature we build, no matter how big or small, every adjustment or update, improvement to an existing feature, we're interviewing dozens of property managers. So yes, we have a hypothesis, but we're not the actual end user. So we're using the mind cumulative hundreds and hundreds of managers to ensure we're delivering real value. And that's never going to change. I think that's core to everything we do.
What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs looking to enter the prop tech industry?
We're coming from another industry and you want to build prop tech. It's not enough to just think and have an idea and build. Like, you need to train yourself in what it's like to be your end user and then solve the real problems and pain points. You got to ask your users the simple question of like, what is the single most frustrating or challenging thing you face now day to day? And then solve for that.
Welcome to the Mastering Property Management Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Sarbit. Join me as we delve into candid conversations with industry experts to uncover their strategies and insights for achieving success in property management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, let's elevate your property management skills together. Hi, everybody. I'm Jared Sarbit. This is Mastering Property Management. Today, I have the honor and privilege of having Emiel Bril on. He's the co-founder and CEO of VendorPM. Emiel, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Emiel, tell us a little bit about VendorPM. Give us a brief overview. How does it benefit both property managers and vendors, and what exactly does it do?
For sure. I find that people typically care more about why you do something than what you do. So I'll kind of share a little bit about how it all came together. The story actually goes back to high school. Me and my best friend, we were knocking doors selling window cleaning. We were 14 years old in our local neighborhood here in Toronto. And we ended up growing this window cleaning business throughout high school, throughout university, and got eventually pulled into the world of property management. So we moved away from single family homes and we started servicing property managers across every asset class. So we're talking multi, condo, office, retail, you name it. And we came to learn two fundamental things. One is that the amount of money that our industry spends on service vendors is mind-boggling. I mean, we're coming up to $600 billion annually in North America. But if you start to really analyze the way that vendors and managers work together, there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm not saying that it's a system that isn't working, but it could be done a lot better. I mean, a lot of it is still email, Excel, and word of mouth. So that's where the mission, the vision for VendorPM was born, just to modernize the way vendors and property managers work together. So this actually leads to answering your question now. So VendorPM is vendor management, compliance, and procurement software built specifically for our industry, for the world of property management. What that actually means is it's a platform for management companies to onboard, approve, and manage all of their service vendors, as well as run all of their tendering, their RFPs, their RFQs. As of recently, there's integrations into key ERPs such as Yardi. We're available in French for Quebec, so we're talking to a Canadian audience. And then there's also some other new features like our ESG, supplier diversity, DE&I. Really important things that our customers really care about. Amazing.
And sorry, what year was it founded?
So VendorPM was founded at the end of 2019. But as anyone who started a business knows, like those first early days are a mess to say the least. So really started to get, pick up. Interestingly enough, the start of 2020, I remember we're just getting really good momentum on March 14th and then March 15th. Of course, something happened in this world.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was interesting. And I think that actually benefited us quite a bit because at the end of the day, what did COVID expedited technology across the board. It expedited virtual communication significantly, but I even comes right down to the way you work with vendors. So I think it was an accelerant for us.
Amazing. Very cool. And tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey when you were in high school. I think I read on your website you were 14 years old, started a window cleaning company. That's amazing. What was your inspiration to do that at that age? Were you saving up? My son started a detailing car business at 11 years old here, so he could buy a PlayStation, which he successfully did a few days ago. But I would love to hear what was your inspiration at that age to start a business?
Well, first of all, kudos to your son. That's awesome. And he beat me by 3 years. So Before starting anything in the business world, I was a swimmer. So I'd started that, I think like grade 3 or grade 4. And quickly became obsessed. Like I was training before school, after school, Speedo cap goggles, like the whole 9 yards, and on the Olympic path. Like that was the only thing that I was obsessed about. And then unfortunately probably at the age of 14, my father, he'd fallen ill, and something about that just prevented me from swimming anymore. And I wanted to do something different, something I think that was more meaningful to myself, maybe my family at that time. And so that's where I joined my co-founder Dylan, knocking doors, selling window cleaning. I wanted to make money instead of just swimming every day. That's really where the whole journey kicked off. I think that I became obsessed with the notion of obviously solving problems. That's why anyone really truly starts a business, but also just being able to build something that you could look back on and say, like, I'm proud of that. Like that's something really cool that we should all be proud of. So I think the motivations have sort of evolved over time, and it's something I think that is truly really special. It's maybe born out of a shitty situation, being my father being passing, but nonetheless it's turned into a really beautiful outcome, which is VendorPM today.
Yeah, wow, that's a special story, that's for sure. It's more than just looking for money, that's for sure. There's real purpose behind it. Yeah, it's amazing. And sorry, your father, you said, has since passed. Yeah, may rest in peace.
For 8 years. So when I was 14, and then passed when I was 22. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. My condolences. How does VendorPM simplify the traditionally manual processes, as you mentioned, on the Excel spreadsheets and that sort of thing, in the vendor management and procurement processes?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here. I won't bore you or your audience with all of the details, but when you think about vendor management and compliance, I mean, if you ask some management companies, and this isn't unique to a small handful, this is largely the industry. How do you manage your vendors? It's either, we've got an AP list, like our accounts payable list in Yardi, or like here's a list of our approved vendors, and it's like an Excel spread, not even Excel spread, it's like a PDF that's static and stale from like a year, right? So number one is that we completely centralize the preferred or approved vendor list. This becomes the single source of truth. Why is it the single source of truth? Because VendorPM is the place where all of those vendors become compliant and approved. Now, that means something different for every company. So CBRE will have different approval requirements than JLL, than Bentall, and the list goes on, right? Jared Property Management says these are the things that a vendor needs to be true in order to be approved. COI, workers' comp, health and safety, the list goes on. We do the vendor onboarding, so we get all that documentation. We have a team that verifies all of it, and then we manage all of that in perpetuity, so that if your company is approved on a Monday, but something falls out of compliance on a Tuesday, you're notified, the managers are notified, everything is handled immediately. We've got a team to support all of that. So kind of like the vendor management and compliance piece. With that, I mentioned some items like supplier diversity and DEI. So a lot of companies have to submit ESG reporting, and it's just something they generally care about, so we can track and report on that. And then there's the actual procurement workflow, which there's bells and whistles, such as a way to plan and schedule upcoming services and contracts, so that when it's time, you're tendering them, and that's going through VendorPM. But the core workflow that really VendorPM started with was the RFP and the RFQ workflow. This is hands down the most efficient way to tender all of your building services. And then the last piece to that is our marketplace. So across Canada and a growing number of US states, there's over 60,000 vendors that you can source from. If, for example, you've been going to the same 2 or 3 vendors for the past 10 years, nothing wrong with that, but it's nice to get some fresh pricing and fresh perspective every now and then. And you can do that in the marketplace.
Brilliant. Very, very cool. VendorPM offers vendor sourcing, procurement, management, and compliance under one login. Can you explain how these features work together to provide a seamless experience?
Yeah, that really is a true competitive wedge that we don't really see out there, because there are compliance tools that exist, and many vendors know because they have to sign up for all of them. I know it's frustrating. And quickly, VendorPM is winning that market share. We want to simplify this, not just for the managers, but for the vendors too, so that all of it goes through VendorPM for them. But to your question, What doesn't exist is a holistic workflow where you're logging into here, you're finding your vendor, you're getting them onboarded and approved, you're tendering it out. And there's so many synergies that you wouldn't even think about. For example, when you're doing your vendor selection for an RFP or an RFQ, it's pulling in the live compliance statuses. So I don't have to swivel and look at this other platform to say, oh, here are my approved vendors. Now let me tender through VendorPM. It's all there at once. Let's say, Jared, they found your company through VendorPM in the marketplace. If you awarded the work, the managers don't have to do anything. You're automatically enrolled in that property management company's onboarding workflow, completing all their requirements, and the list just goes on. There's a lot of synergy that comes from integrating all these things under one roof.
Brilliant. Really, really smart. This is kind of a side question that just came to mind, but you do both residential property management and commercial. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, awesome. And is there a certain market that you kind of grew with initially, or do they kind of both kind of came together at the same time? Or
it's a good question. I think that if you think about the residential space, it's a lot more fragmented than the commercial space. I think the commercial space is a lot more concentrated. So you've got a lot of these, you have a ton of these whales, these massive office management companies that control a large portion of the market share, right? Residential, I think there's a far more small, mid-sized businesses. So it was easier to grow in the early days with residential, just given that our product wasn't the robust platform that it is today. And again, in 5 years from now, it's going to be exponentially more robust than it is now. I would say that in the early days grew a lot more with residential, but where we are now, 5 years or so into this journey, we're starting to win a lot of business with not only the large office players that are controlling a large majority of the office market, but also larger residential players as well.
Amazing. And talking about growing, you've grown substantially in 5 years, and congratulations to all your success. I believe you've gotten some funding as well. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. I'll use this as a chance to say thank you to all those very early investors that took a real bet because there wasn't much for them to look at in terms of data and all these other things. So yeah, there were some really incredible early investors that saw a vision and a team that would stop at nothing to make that vision come true. But as we continue to scale and grow, I mean, we've brought on some of the world's best investors. One of our largest investors is Bessemer. They invested in companies like Shopify, Twitch, LinkedIn, DocuSign, Wix. We've got some really cool investors in the real estate world like Colliers, RXR, some folks at Avis and Young. We even have the former CEO of Twitter is an angel investor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so
amazing.
we probably raised about a little over $30 million to date. And that's been critical because I know we are solving a real problem, and I know that we are going to win this market, but this is an accelerant. It's allowed us to do that a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently, so that when one of these large residential or commercial players says, I love everything you're doing, I need this, you already need French or whatever it is. It's not like, okay, we'll talk about it in a year from now. It's like, all right, turn to my team and we get this for our customers.
Incredible. Congratulations. That's awesome. And just goes to show, I mean, that there's many major players that have a lot of confidence in what you're doing. So that must be an exciting feeling for you guys.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to all of those clients too, not just the investors.
For sure. Very cool. How does the AI assistance in VendorPM improve communication between property managers and vendors?
Let me answer that with a question first. When you get requests, an RFP, an RFQ, whatever it might be from a manager, sometimes do you look at it and you're just like, as a vendor, are you frustrated with like, I need more information. What do I do with this?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this was a feature that interfaces with, and by the way, this is the first of many AI features that we're going to be rolling out. This interfaces with the property manager, but it's mutually beneficial to the vendors as well. Number one piece of feedback that we get or criticism that we get from vendors is, I have all these questions for property managers. Sometimes they're slow to respond, whatever. I don't know how to submit a bid with what I was given, right? So what this AI Copilot does in our RFP module is it takes a number of prompts, asset class, asset location, any historical data. It takes into account like whatever the description of work that was provided, even if it's light and minimal. And it creates far more robust and descriptive scope of work that is more valuable to the vendors, and it saves the managers a lot of time. Because there's tens of thousands of tenders that go through VendorPM, we also use that data set to say, okay, what are the most frequently asked questions that vendors are asking relative to this scope of work. And then we can essentially proactively showcase to the manager, here are some of the questions that vendors are likely going to ask. Try to answer them now so it avoids everyone the back and forth and all that unnecessary.
Brilliant. That is so smart. Very cool. What kind of feedback have you received from property managers and vendors who have used VendorPM?
Yeah. So, I mean, on the manager side, well, I have to distinguish. There's the property managers at the site level, and then there's the VPs and C-suites at the corporate level. There's different value props for both. So for the managers, obviously it's important that they stay within budget. VendorPM actually statistically comes in well below budget. That's largely due to having a sophisticated bidding tool and a marketplace to increase your supply. So that's important to managers. It's also important to corporate. Most important to property managers is just simply giving them time back. Like, I have so much empathy for every property manager out there. It is not an easy job, and it's only getting harder with more demands. They need time back in their day. If we can give them at least, a couple hours a week back, like we've done. So that's on the manager side. On the corporate side, it's things like visibility, governance, reporting. Of course, there's cost savings as well that matter a lot to them. So those are some of the key points there, and reducing risk, of course, to the compliance side. The vendors, a lot of vendors have, a dozen clients that are using VendorPM. So instead of having to go and do things 12 times, it's all centralized in one place, A. B, a lot of them have grown their businesses substantially because there's 150 management companies on VendorPM. Like, if they're only working with 10 or 20, whatever it might be, it gives them exposure a lot more.
You're right. Brilliant. Very good. Can you share a specific success story or a case study where VendorPM significantly improved operations for a property management group or a vendor?
Sure. I'll leave names out of it, but there's one group that took quite a while to crack. They were a little bit risk adverse, totally understandable. But eventually we started with a pilot. And in that pilot, I think they did about a dozen tenders. And each tender, we were able to come in over 20% below budget, which equated to savings of almost 20 grand per tender. And that averaged out across 12. Like, it wasn't just an anomaly, right? The corporate, again, this is the dichotomy between corporate and the managers. Corporate looked at this, was like, why haven't we been doing this before? But the levels were literally like, you have saved me a cumulative 10 hours over these RFPs. Like, that is valuable time for me. So that case study was successful because we took that small sample size, which did a really compelling picture, and expanded across hundreds of buildings in the country because, well, why wouldn't you, right? I get it. Like, large companies that have national portfolios, there's risk in partnering with someone new and saying, I'm going to give you every single one of my buildings. So these pilots are important. And when we can provide those sort of results, which is not uncommon, it goes a long way.
I love it. That's a great example. Thank you. VendorPM has seen rapid growth since its launch, including expanding into the US and raising significant financing, as you've already mentioned. What factors do you attribute to this? Like, why VendorPM? I mean, there's so many tech startups in this, in the prop tech industry. Why VendorPM?
Well, first of all, I think that when I think back to some of our early investors and their investing philosophy. Ultimately, A, is the market big enough? And that's an important factor to the investors. It's not necessarily in the context of this conversation. But number 2 and 3, is this a real problem you're solving? Like you said, there's a lot of tech out there, and a lot of it is, especially with, the AI boom, a lot of it is what I'll call vanity tech, in that it is compelling on the surface, but does it really solve a true problem in your day-to-day? Does it add real value? And then number 3, is this the right team to do it? So let's focus on the last two. The first item being, is this a real problem? I mean, we look at the way that vendors and managers work together today. I was a vendor, and I sat across hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000+ property managers, sometimes to the point of, like, they're in tears at the amount of stress and work that they have. And it's clear that there's a better way to be able to do this. So there is a real problem here. And then in terms of the team, startups are not glamorous. They suck a lot of the time. And if you don't have a team that is willing to dedicate everything to this and bash through every brick wall to deliver for your customers, you're not going to make it. And we've been so fortunate that since day one, we've just had some of the most intelligent, talented, and hardworking people that we just wouldn't be here. That wasn't the case. And then the last thing I'll say, which really comes through every time a user sees VendorPM for the first time, they're like, this is so easy to use and very intuitive. Intuitive is the key word. The reason that's so important is because every single feature we build, no matter how big or small, every adjustment or update, improvement to an existing feature, we're interviewing dozens of property managers. So yes, we have a hypothesis, but we're not the actual end user. So we're using the mind cumulative hundreds and hundreds of managers to ensure we're delivering real value. And that's never going to change. I think that's core to everything we do.
Brilliant. That's really good. We're always looking at, different softwares and that sort of thing for our business. And I'm not a tech guy at all. So for me, you're absolutely right. The most important thing is being intuitive, that I can go on there and it's user friendly. The interface looks good. It moves easy. It's super, maneuverable and does exactly what I need to do. It's got to be so simple and so smooth. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think that is an advantage to raising capital and therefore having a team that can execute on that. But B, it's also, I think that's an advantage to being a newer player, if that makes sense. If you've been around for 30, 40 years, as there's a lot of very big and successful companies that are, it's hard to turn the Titanic, if you know what I mean. And so, there's legacy UI and interfaces, and it's not as intuitive, and it's hard to make those adjustments when you're dealing with such a massive code base. Like, not their fault. They've built a real solution to a real problem, but it's hard to adapt. And I think that's some of the advantages to having the team that we do, and sort of being the sort of size and scale that we are. We can solve quickly.
Makes a lot of sense. I love it. What new and innovative features can users expect from VendorPM in the near future?
So as a broader vision, similar to integrating the vendor management and compliance piece into procurement and the marketplace and having all of that under one roof, we do not want our property managers logging into new other systems in order to complete a workflow that should all live within VendorPM. Let's just say Yardi, MRI, RealPage, your ERP, where your accounting and finance is done. Everything up until that should live in VendorPM, and then all of that should integrate and seamlessly flow into the ERP. So some core additions would be things like, there are vendor ratings and reviews, but a far more robust vendor performance management mechanism, contract lifecycle management. And then there's so much to be done on the AI front. A couple examples, and I won't bore you with all of them. Bid analysis. Imagine you're a property manager. You say, okay, I'm evaluating this RFP based on 30% price, 40% quality, and then percent risk and health and safety, whatever it is, right? And the AI will literally take all the vendor submissions and say, here's who you should go with for these reasons. Recommend like all of it, right? Yeah,
I love that. Oh man, that is so cool. I play with ChatGPT all the time and do stuff like that. Like I'll put my QuickBooks, balance sheet and P&L in there and just say, give me an analysis. So that's so smart. That's such a great idea.
Let me ask you, what was the first thing that you did on ChatGPT? This is always fun when you hear people.
I think it was write me a song about my kids who one plays basketball, one plays soccer, whatever, in the voice of Tupac Shakur. So, I'm pretty sure that's what I did.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I did something so it was like a poem or a song,
right?
Just to troll a friend. I put in all the most ridiculous. I like the awesome. Flavor. That's nice.
Yeah, awesome. All right, where am I? How do you envision the future of vendor management and property management in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, obviously, it's going to be continually to be tech driven. Where do you see it going in the future here?
Well, I think it's no surprise or no shock that our industry is rather antiquated. I mean, if you think about a general adoption curve with innovators, early adopters, or the majority, and so on and so forth, I think property management and real estate is behind when it comes to relative to other industries. That's not news to anybody. And I think that we'll naturally, as an industry, VendorPM aside, move further along the adoption curve, and a rising tide lifts all boats. We will have more adoption of good technology and more investment of technology in our industry. What does that mean for us? Well, it comes back to what I said before. It's everything that exists up until the point of paying an invoice in Yardi, whatever it might be, lives in VendorPM. So it's really going from finding the vendor, onboarding, approving, tendering, bid analysis, contract lifecycle management, vendor performance management, all of that, right up until the point of, okay, this now flows into your ERP. But, if you asked anybody, even outside of property management, like, what does this world look like in 5 years from now? Like, it's not one that is predicated on like a notebook and Excel spreadsheets and like everything over email. Like, no, like a lot of this should be keyword intuitive, and then as a byproduct of intuitive, automated. And a lot of that can now be done with AI. So we're getting quickly. It's not just a matter of building and investing in the technology. It's a matter of the adoption from an industry. And again, I think that adoption curve over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be significant.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. You're absolutely right. I think right now it's a lot of piecemeal. A lot of companies are specialized in one part of the technology or one part of the property, but it's just a matter of time before it's all flows together into one. That's where, man, that's going to be sticky, and people will stay with you for life. If you have your CRM, your ERP. You've been saying, I'm assuming that's like QuickBooks or that's right. Is that ERP?
Yeah. So like in our world, like in the property management side, a lot of it's already MRI, RealPage, a little bit of JD Edwards. But yeah, on your side, I think it's like predominantly a QuickBooks, for example.
Right. Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's I can't wait for that day. Oh, that's going to be such a game changer where you don't have a bunch of different apps and softwares. You can all be in one. That'll be an amazing time.
It will be, but I'm also a big proponent of. I'm going to blow the analogy for a second. I think it's jack of all trades, master of none. Right. So that's the concern is if you try to do everything, you will fail. I'm a big proponent of being truly exceptional, like hands down, no questions asked, the best at a few things. So how do those two statements live in at the same time or are true at the same time? It's the connectivity and the integration. So I don't think that VendorPM is going to be the world's best leasing software as an example. Right. No one should have going down that path. But if we want to have one connected, integrated system, then you need to be able to open your software up to others and integrate so that you can connect the best in breed.
Perfect. That's exactly it. I'm just sick of the double inputting. We have to put it in, 5 different places, and that as long as that can be solved, I'm happy. So yeah, it makes sense. Awesome. What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs looking to enter the prop tech industry?
So it really depends if you've come from that world or not. The one thing I hear often from CIOs, CTOs of massive real estate companies is they often see tech, or even on the venture side, on the prop tech, in the prop tech world, they see solutions and companies that comes back to that word I used earlier, vanity. It's a finance person that sees an opportunity because there is an opportunity here in such a massive market, but doesn't truly understand, again, the keyword intuitive, the intuitive nature that exists between, how a property manager thinks and feels and operates day to day. The same on the vendor side. You need to live and breathe it in order to truly understand how to solve it. And so if you're coming from another industry and you want to build prop tech, it's not enough to just think and have an idea and build. Like, you need to brain yourself in what it's like to be your end user and then solve the real problems and pain points. Like, it's not complicated. You got to ask your users the simple question of, like, what is the single most frustrating or challenging thing you face now day to day, and then solve for that.
Yeah. Awesome. Really good. Thank you. If you could revolutionize the vendor management process for any iconic building or landmark in the world, which one would it be and why?
Do you mind if I take a slightly tangent approach to this question?
By all means.
Okay. So, I remember back in high school, the window cleaning days, my first crappy little cars, like a Saturn Ion with half the letters missing. You drive through the neighborhoods or whatever, and you'd be like, that's our client. That's like all these houses, we've serviced this, and like there's this real sense of pride there. And now, whether it's Toronto, it's Alberta, or it's Vancouver, doesn't matter. I'm traveling for work and I'm in these cities and I'm like, that building is on VendorPM. That building is on VendorPM. And so, it's that moment where, you're looking at the skyline and you're like, we have made a difference to this, like to the city. And I can't say there's not one building. It's just like, I want to look at a city and be like, I know I made a difference to the skyline. Could you imagine, when I started to reflect on oh, this is like the thing that makes me feel really good. I thought to myself, could you imagine being like a Steve Jobs or a Tim Cook and just walking through any place in the world and being like, look, wait, there's an iPhone in this person's hand. Yeah, as they're walking away on their MacBook. Like that's the ultimate, yeah, because it's like
impact
a thing, right? Like a physical building or like a physical
Yeah.
or whatever it might be.
Yes. It's literally a vision and a dream, playing out in real life, and like something that was up here is happening out there. And that is
Other people outside of like your own mind. Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. Very cool. You and I would get along really well.
I think so.
Yeah, for sure. And then finally, my last question is, if you could recommend any book to property managers to read. I'm not being a property manager yourself, but there might be something that you obviously want to make their life better. So, what book would that be, and why?
So, there's one book that I recommend to anybody and everybody, and it's Good to Great. You've probably read it. It's timeless.
Jim Collins.
Yeah. Just like I read that book a lot because every quarter we grow, we're smarter, whatever it is, and you read it differently every time. It doesn't matter, property manager, vendor, it doesn't, like, anybody needs to read that book. Now, if you are wanting to get into the tech side of property, like prop tech, Good to Great, but also there's this book from, I believe it's Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And you might recognize the last name Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, the world's most successful venture fund. That book is something else. But Good to Great for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, funny enough, I think we have 3 Good to Greats on our shelf. Like somehow my wife had one. What's that?
Do you gift them to people, or you've been gifted to?
No, I don't know how it happened. Like my wife had one, I had one. I don't know where the third one came from. But it is. You're absolutely right. I've read it twice, and completely different the second time. And you're 100% right. I'll read it again, and it is a really, really powerful book. It really is.
Think of life.
Thank you for that. Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, Emiel, really an honor to have you on. Congratulations again on all your success, and I know that your father would be incredibly proud of what you're doing. So you should be very proud as well, and can't wait to see where things are going with you guys. I know we're signed up on VendorPM, and now that I've met you, we're going to get even deeper into it because you've excited me with where you guys are going. So you got a dedicated customer right here, that's for sure.
I appreciate that, sir. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure as well. All right. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Perfect.